Welcome to Past and Present with Allison Gilbert. My name is Andy Engel. I am Senior Programmer at Reimagine. Our mission at Reimagine is to help people of all backgrounds face adversity, loss, and mortality, and channel the hard parts of life into meaningful action and growth. I would like to thank Domani for their support of this series. Mark your calendars also for the next Past and Present with Allison. Her guests will be journalists Jean Chatzky and Catherine Tuggle on May 26. They'll discuss how to be financially prepared and avoid making mistakes as you plan for yourself and your loved ones. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce Allison. Allison Gilbert is the author of numerous books, including the forthcoming biography of Hearst newspaper columnist Elsie Robinson, to be published by Basic Books Hachette in September. Her most recent book, Past and Present, Keeping Memories of Loved Ones Alive, reveals creative ways to remember family and friends we never want to forget. And you can follow Allison on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. She's everywhere as A. Gilbert Writer. And with that, it's my pleasure to hand this over to Allison.
Good morning, everybody. I am so happy to see everyone again. As always, the last Thursday of every month, I think, is my happiest time. And I should also say good afternoon, because of course it's 1 o'clock here Eastern where I am, but I wanted to acknowledge my friends across this great country. And I'm honored today to be here. I thank Reimagine for this incredible platform, and I owe such gratitude to Domani for Grief for having the leadership to allow, to enable, to support just these types of conversations. And I also want to say good afternoon to my friend, Pastor Corey Kennard.
Hello, everyone. And Allison, it's absolutely great to see you. And it's an honor to be here. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. And I know you are joining us. At least you are from Michigan. Are you in Michigan this morning?
I am in Michigan. I just got back from Seattle and I'm just happy to be back home now. I'm here present, ready to go.
Well, I wanted to start our conversation in an unusual place. I've done some real deep exploration into your work. I've gone down, dug deep to find all of your past writing, all of your wonderful conversations, because you have written from the heart and spoken from the heart so often about end of life, about death, about grief. And you talked about one analogy that I thought was so wonderfully evocative. And it's about Band-Aids. And it's about Band-Aids and how they used to be produced. And what you say that means about grief and how we manage our feelings. Take it from there.
Uh-oh. So you went really deep, didn't you? And it was Band-Aids were one size fits all, I believe is what you're referring to, and how you could not pick the size, the color, the shape. You just had to take what was there and try to cover up your pain or that wound. And so with grief, there's not a one size fits all. When we experience a grieving moment, like the new Band-Aid brand and other Band-Aid, well, we call them Band-Aids. Isn't that funny how everything is a Band-Aid, right? But at bandage, what we find is that there are various shapes and sizes for the types of wounds that we may feel. And so we are able to help one another out by not just approaching someone who's experiencing grief with a one size fits all, or we can just say, well, just pray or just read this or just talk to this person. But we have a great opportunity to feel where that person is and then to apply the appropriate bandage so that healing can take place while they are being covered by that situation, which is the function of a Band-Aid, is really just to cover that wound and to protect it while it's in the healing process. And so we as human beings, we need that covering, but we need various ways in which to be covered and not just one particular way. And to me, it's never a one size fits all.
I love it because it's so visual. And I feel like when we tell stories, perhaps in an hour when we leave this conversation, if there's something to remember, the one thought to remember, it's like Band-Aid or adhesive bandage. It's like not everything is one size. Not every piece of literature or resource will speak to you. For some people, maybe some of the folks who you speak to with your church, maybe it is spirituality, maybe it is religion. Perhaps for others, it's not. So how do you pay attention to what works for you? How do you clear the noise
Mhm.
and crack yourself open so you can be receptive to what actually works for you? How do you do that?
You have to get ego out of the way. That's the first thing. Ego is our biggest enemy. And so, in order to be receptive, for instance, with my approach with our congregation, you'll be surprised to find out that when we approach things from a grief standpoint, it's more from a humanistic standpoint and not necessarily diving right in with faith or religion. Why? Because at that moment, at that point, any traumatic situation may even turn a person against what they actually believe, or at least they want to put that on pause and say, you know what? I'm not feeling this God thing right now. I'm not feeling this faith thing right now because I just lost my loved one or I just lost a close friend. And I'm struggling with this whole thing now. So my approach really is to find out where a person is emotionally, where they are from a humanistic standpoint. Where's that hurt really stemming from? Have there been other instances of hurt that they can reflect upon and then see themselves as getting through those situations and saying, you know what, this hurts just as much as it hurt before, but I'm still here. And so I can be resilient enough to get through this as well with the right people around me, and then they can look at the methods in which helped them before. But for me, I have to be open and I have to be realistic that, once again, one size does not fit all, even with people of faith. Many people reject prayer. They reject this idea of God in those instances, and that's okay. And I let them know it's all right in this moment. And I just want to talk with you as another human being who has experienced hurt and pain, and just let us reflect upon this experience now and what's going on in your life.
Do you find there to be room in this conversation for religion versus spirituality? Those two seem to be on different sides of a rainbow, or do you feel that there's some sort of interconnectedness that could appeal to more people who may be distancing themselves from, say, formal religion? How do you feel about spirituality versus religion when it comes to conversations about grief?
You know, and I'll start here at this point because I think that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it, being the great journalist that you are. Um, with When I look at religion and I look at spirituality, what happens is our spirituality can evolve into a religious practice where we then close ourselves off to only those things or those ways which make us feel good. And we say that, you know, I'm good now. I go, say, for instance, if a person feels like walking in the forest is a spiritual experience, okay, that can express spirituality, being one with nature. But when you feel like you have to do it on this particular day at this particular time, and then if you don't do it, you feel bad, now you've turned that spiritual experience into a religious one, where there are certain methods and there's only one way in which to express yourself from a spiritual standpoint. So to me, religion is not bad. It's just that I believe that if you are a person of faith, your relationships help to honor and express what true spirituality is about. And for me, spirituality expresses that which is within us, that is able to see beyond where we are in order to obtain the things that we desire and need in this life to get through it. Peace, joy, honor, respect, all of those things. And religion kind of houses how you do those things. So they're not diametrically opposing one another, and they can complement. It's just that when we go too far with religion and shut everybody else off and all other methods off, then we lose the true beauty and essence of spirituality.
You mentioned nature, and I just have to say, I just wrote a post on the Domani for Grief blog about nature, right? It's free. You don't have to pay anyone. It's always right outside your door, whether it's cold or hot or fall. And there's something about nature that I have learned in the reporting over the years. And here's what I've learned about why nature is so healing. And I wonder, Corey, if you could amplify this following point in your own way. But here's what the science says about why getting outside is so healthy and helpful at a time of grief and loss, especially. When loss happens, it's depleting. People are asking of us. We need to give of ourselves to make sure perhaps our friends and our loved ones, how are they doing, right? We are caregivers, we are caretakers, and that can, of course, be incredibly draining. And of course, the sadness, we all know that grief can make us feel incredibly tired. And here's what's different about nature. It puts on a show and doesn't ask for anything in return. You can just be, you can exist, and the sun will be on your skin. The wind will rustle through the trees. The gurgling of the brook will make that beautiful sound. And you're not required to do anything in exchange for that.
You know, that was beautiful. What you just described to me is a beautiful spiritual experience. And I was just thinking about that in this 40-degree weather that I'm experiencing here in Detroit. That sounds really good. But what we realize at that point when you're one with nature is that life is all around us, and plants and trees and the grass and the water flowing and the wind blowing, all are representative of life. And we get a chance to be re-energized by those things that actually help to give us life. I mean, plants give us life. We're, 60, 70% water, our bodies are. So we're reconnecting with who we really are and the things that we need in order to survive. And that's why nature is important. And then we see that reflected in the animals and that you may see as you're walking through nature or the things that are going on. Nature is such a vital part of life. And sometimes we get caught up in the brick and the mortar of this life that we lose sight of those beautiful things that just have come about and were created and not something that someone built. And so it allows you to relax and know that there is something greater than you are that is at work here. And when you see the beauty from the plants and hear the bubbling brook, as you described in such an eloquent way, it just reminds you of the fact that your life is still valuable. And because you're able to experience those things, then the grief that you are experiencing is another thing that you are experiencing in life. But that too can pass if you really focus on the beauty of nature in and of itself. Not saying that you're going to get over your grief. You're not going to hurt anymore. But it can definitely hurt less when you begin to reflect over time of the beauty of life in and of itself.
So let's leave nature in one side of the equation and let's talk about where we can feel that sense of connection in other ways, For me, I would love to admit something that's kind of embarrassing, but I can get a lot of spiritual pleasure from an amazing piece of chocolate cake, let's say, or some amazing ice cream that just kind of reminds me, like it's the flavor that maybe my dad enjoyed before he died. And so the flavor is my connection to my father. Or if my mother, she loved peanut M&Ms, right? She loved nuts, she loved chocolate. So just going to the gas station on a day where I may feel like I want to connect with her, she died so many years ago, having that taste, having that texture, that too is a form of connection. It doesn't have to be nature, right? You can find it in your soup, in the ice cream, in the chocolate cake, don't you think?
Definitely. And one thing that you didn't mention that I actually heard you mention before is music. Listening to certain songs, connecting with those that candy or that cake that maybe your mom used to make that just smelled so good when it was baking in the oven, and then you walk by a bakery and you smell that same smell, and you're reminded of the beauty of your mother and how she made that cake with love. So those are great reminders and ways to reflect, and they're all around us. Wherever we go, whatever we do, we can always see and sense a reminder that the person who is no longer with us is still with us. They are still present with us, and they've given us the pleasure of having great memories and things to be reminded of, that they were here and that they impacted your life. And if you just walked around and felt nothing and saw them in nothing and didn't feel anything when you grabbed that bag of M&Ms, knowing that they loved M&Ms, then something is wrong, at that point. You have to question, did you really love them? But, the fact that, you can find that love and that joy in just about anything that person was engaged in once they are no longer with us physically. And you just have to be open to seeing those things. And I just think from a spiritual standpoint, they come to you. They come to you.
And that's why I have chocolate cake every single day. Is that wrong? No.
That sounds like
I'm not just
a religious experience that you're having there.
I'm just playing. I know many people wanted to join our conversation today because there were some words that we used in how we introduced you. Obviously, you are a pastor. You have such wonderful things to say that I have seen on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and now you are on TikTok. And so if you do want to follow Pastor Corey, let me give you a few handles that you can get on. Twitter is at Pastor Corey. Instagram is I am Pastor Corey. Facebook is Corey L. Kennard. And TikTok, because of course you're on TikTok, is I am Pastor Corey. But one thing you do talk about is the word coach and coaching. And what does that mean in this context? How do you coach men, women, teenagers, older people? What does that mean in this context?
Once again, you're asking all the great questions. I don't think I've ever been interviewed this well before. But I must say this, I must say this, that if you think about coach, let's go back to the original term. A coach was used to transport individuals from one place to another. And so the way that I look at me being a coach is from that standpoint of being able to remind a person of where they are right now, find out where they want to go, and then give them the vehicle by which to get there. And so that's a literal coach. Another term of coach, another way of looking at coach, is from a sports analogy. How can I bring the best out of you? That which is in you that you don't even know exists right now. And I can see it because I'm listening to you. You may not hear it or hear the things that you're saying, but I'm listening to these things and I'm understanding now what's in you. And so it's important for me to take what's in you and bring it out of you, allow you to see it, and then allow you seeing it to make you better. and then showing you the benefit.
I need to break this down. So many of us, including me, I'm not in Michigan, in Detroit. And so if I wanted to have a coach or potentially benefit from what you're talking about, are you describing something that you do on a one-on-one basis, or are you describing it in a more macro sense where you can seek out this type of coaching wherever we are?
So both. I do both. In a macro sense, I think it's important for individuals to have a person who they can speak to. That person can listen and then help them to get to the place where they need to be. And then also for me, what I do is I offer myself personally to individuals who may want to just talk a little bit more about where they are, and then give them an opportunity to express. And then I listen, and then I can say, okay, well, let's get now in the coach, in the wagon, and let's go from this place to this place. And this is how we're going to get there. And you're not going to get there right away. As you know, coach rides back in the day, if you look at the old Westerns, it took a while to get there. It wasn't a quick plane ride across the country. And so it could take days, it could take months, it could take years. But you have to see yourself with the wheels moving and you getting closer and closer to your goal.
How would someone go about, and maybe this is an unfair question to ask you. I didn't prep you with this question beforehand. Um, how would you find someone who can serve as this type of coach for you, no matter where you are? I imagine it's not something you can likely Google. How would you find this type of support? We have people joining this call from all over the country. If not, I didn't see all the locations in our chat, but typically we've had people internationally, especially from Canada. How would that exploration do you suggest? How could it begin?
It could begin with you just finding out who are those grief counselors in your community, in your area. A good friend of mine, Elizabeth Copland, who I believe is actually on this call right now, is a person who you can reach out to as well. Grief Dialogues. There are organizations that offer Reimagine offers, opportunities for people to seek out resources within their own communities. So finding those organizations, our sponsor today, all of these organizations are here to help. And so talking with a great person like Allison is another opportunity. Emailing her, emailing myself. But we have resources and we have connections worldwide. And we can get you to those individuals or that individual that you may need to help you through your process.
Wait, let me just politely interrupt you just for a second. So what I've just heard is actually very important and is not actually what I was thinking about when I asked you that question. So I'm actually so grateful that we're now talking about it. So the word coach may be too limiting, right? Maybe the word coach can be expanded. So you're talking about coach in one way. And of course, there are definitely grief coaches that you can Google. There are grief coach, type apps. You are talking about, of course, that Domani for Grief is one type of coaching because they offer these types of programs, or Reimagine is one type of coach. So it sounds like my question in retrospect was actually way too limiting.
I agree. There are organizations, there are groups that meet. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this one-on-one. It could be a matter of going to a website and watching videos and seeing the resources that are there that will help you to see that someone else who may have gone through something very similar to you can give you ways in which they got out of their situation. Once again, it's not a one size fit all. It's not something that says, okay, everything is going to be great after this. But at least what we can do is live with our grief better and not allow it to stifle us. And that is the key.
What you're describing is really the most important point of all of this work. I think we can all say all the negatives all the time about living in the digital era. But on the flip side, we really are so much more aware, and we all have more of an ability to connect when we do need that support.
Right.
When both of my parents died, my brother and I, it was so long ago, there was no internet, right? So we were limited in the support that we could access by who was in our neighborhood, or maybe who called us and could kind of refer us to someone nearby. I feel like what you're describing is that if you are interested, if you are willing to be proactive, if you are able to let your fingers work your phone or your keyboard, there are platforms like Domani for Grief, like Reimagine, like all of your work, of course, in the church that are there. But the one real piece, the one lesson that we must take is that they're not going to come to you necessarily. You must do that work to put yourself in a position to get that support. Do you agree that there's some level of agency that we as the bereaved need to accept?
Yes, and I'm glad you're saying this, and it's because I just even this past week talked to our congregation about this, that there is an expectation that we would have to do something to participate in our process. I posted a quote that said, transformation requires participation. And so we need to participate in our transformation. We can't sit by and expect someone to come by and seek us out and say, "Oh, I heard you were grieving. Let me help you." No, the key is to allow yourself to be open to organizations and individuals who can help you and say, "You know what, let me make a phone call, or let me look up an organization on the internet and see if there's a group that I can be a part of." And I believe that if you participate in the process, then your transformation will then begin to take place.
I will add one thing of logistics about our call today. We are going to be looking in the chat for your comments, for your questions. In about 5-6 minutes or so, I'm going to ask Christina, who is going to look through the chat. There she is waving, to go through the chat, and then she will then select those questions or comments for Pastor Corey Kennard or for me, and we will make sure to hear you, to listen to you, to reflect as many of your concerns back at Pastor Kennard, so we can get you to be involved in this conversation. But something struck me about what you were just saying about putting yourself in position to do something, to take a step. And last time on, I'm getting my glasses because yes, I've reached that age where I need glasses, so forgive me.
And it's getting serious. When you put on the glasses, it gets
It's
serious
getting
now.
serious. So last month it came up that there was, we talked, or Andy, when you read my bio at the beginning, that I'm working on this new book and it's coming out in September, about this incredible writer. Her name is Elsie Robinson, and she died back in the 1950s. And there's no way anyone will know her name. I doubt it. Like, it's going to be a real chore to make sure people can learn about her and want to read this book. But let me wet your whistle a little bit on subject, because you were talking about, and I was talking about, this need of just putting yourself out there and moving forward. Elsie Robinson wrote a lot about grief, and it's one of the reasons that drew me to her. And here's just one of the poems, just a quick little bit. If you don't like poetry, hang in there with me. She's not your typical poet. She says, this is from 1934, by the way. You do not have to face a new day. You have only to face one moment at a time. Make one gesture at a time. Small, mechanical gestures. This is the best part. Put your foot on the floor. Walk into the bathroom. Brush your teeth, wash your face, comb your hair, start the coffee percolator, put on your dress, powder your nose, start the toast, pour out the milk, smile, say good morning to the family, make some light, pleasant remark, put a quiet, friendly hand on a shoulder, sit down. And so on and on throughout the day, no matter how you feel, sad or mad or bewildered, that is all you need to do to live life bravely and beautifully, and in the end, abundantly. Just make the gestures.
That is beautiful. Wow. 1934.
Just a reminder that one step at a time when you're grieving, right? One step at a time. Make the
One, st-
toast.
one step at a time, but do something, as she was stating. You
Yeah.
have to do something. I get excited when I hear just beautiful literature such as that because it is a reminder. We know the things that we need to do, but many times we just need to be reminded of those things. And she is just reminding us that when we go through things, when we understand that life is tough, we have to understand that we are not alone. And so we cannot isolate ourselves. As you know, the greatest punishment of any human being is to be in isolation. That is the greatest punishment. You go to prison. When you get put in the hole, that's the deepest level of punishment that takes place, to be by yourself as a human being. And so, yes, there are times when it's great to be alone, but it's not great to be alone all the time. We were not meant to be like that. We were not built to be that way. And so I find that what she's saying is that get yourself ready for that next step. Get
I
yourself
know.
ready to receive what's coming your way.
I love her. I love her. Her name is Elsie Robinson. I'm in love. I've been in love with her during COVID. To spend my time with Elsie Robinson has been my greatest gift. But we're going to go to some questions now. As a reminder, the conversation will not end exactly at 2:00 completely. It'll end at 2:00 because I am on time. However, Corey Kennard is always available to you. Pastor Corey on Twitter. I am Pastor Corey on Instagram. Corey L. Kennard on Facebook. And TikTok. You're on TikTok as I am Pastor Corey. And by the way, we've been talking about community, and I would be remiss if I didn't let people know that Damani for Grief has a community Facebook page. So if you wanted to join the Damani for Grief community Facebook page, it's private. You have to just say that you want to enter, and you'll of course be approved. But the privacy of being allowed in enables us to vent and to talk and to share and not perhaps feel as public as some other platforms may be. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Christina, who has been going through the chat, I am sure, and who's going to help us with some questions.
The first one we have is, how do we process grief for the living? People who are abusive to us, but are also friends. I'm overwhelmed.
That's interesting. So I'm going to take it that this person is struggling with grief, and those that are around them may not be the best resources. Am I hearing that correctly, Christina?
I don't want to make assumptions, but that's how I understood it as well.
Okay. So can you do me a favor and read the question just one more time, real quickly?
How do we process grief for the living? People who are abusive to us, but are also friends. I'm overwhelmed.
Wow. This is where you have to begin to, what I call expand your circle. This is where you have to begin to look at not help from those who you may be struggling with, but help from those who may not even know you, who are totally unaware of who you are, but a person who you can express yourself and explain your grief to and talk about how difficult it is. And let me say this, and this is what I want to say, and hopefully, if I didn't answer that in the way that the person wanted, if they can rephrase the question, that would be absolutely awesome. But I do want to say that what we do oftentimes is we make grief about us. And I believe that that is an inappropriate way of actually dealing with your grief. Because what I see is we are a part of a greater whole. And whatever we go through, always say that my life is a commercial for someone else. My grief is a commercial for someone else. My pain is a commercial for someone else. If I can get through it and I can show someone the ways in which I was able to cope, deal with, and surrender to the process, then what I'm in a position to do with my own grief is to help someone else who is going through a similar grief experience and giving them an opportunity to see that there is hope. And so if I see my grief circumstances not just about me, but a way in which I can maybe help someone else who may not be as strong as me, who may be willing to just totally give up, if I can show them that there's hope, then my life is a commercial for them to get beyond where they may be in that dark place at that moment. And so I would say once again to that person, expand your circle. Be unafraid to express your thoughts and feelings to someone who you may not know, and that may help you in the process.
I'll just add one thing to that, which is just a personal anecdote, and it won't take very long. I mentioned my brother briefly when we lost our parents. I adore my brother. He's my older brother. We both loved our parents, but we both completely grieved and experience the loss still to this day of our parents very differently. And the comfort I received in many respects came from other places. And it doesn't mean that I don't love my brother, and it doesn't mean that he doesn't love me. It just means that we may need to get the support from people who are not close to us. And that may be where the richest help comes from. Christina, what else do you have?
So the next, Allison, you actually answered one of the questions, which was great about siblings. So thank you. The next one we have is there's some chat, people talking back and forth about loved ones saying, I can't imagine what you're going through. And they're right, but they don't know how to help people help them. So what advice do you have to for people asking for help?
When I think about that phrase, and that's the other end of the spectrum, right? I can't imagine what you're going through. And that is clearly to me a better phrase than someone coming up and saying to you, I know what you're going through. So, because every grief experience is personal. So for someone to say, I can't imagine, is an appropriate way in which to approach someone and not to belittle their grief or not to make it seem like it's just so common. So to say that is respectful, but also not taking it a step further and seeing how you can really listen and sit down with that person and work through the process is something totally different. So a person who's seeking help and they're only getting from people, I can't imagine how you feel. Those are individuals who are saying to you, that's all they know how to say. And it's okay. It's okay. That's their way of trying to identify and connect with you in some way. But at the same time, as Allison said, it's important for us to go beyond our comfortable spaces with those whom we know, and then maybe seek someone out who, once again, may not know us, but has the ability to listen and offer ways in which you can better cope with your grief.
Before we go on to the next question, I have one more question for you, although I may have more, but here's one that just popped into my mind. In my promotion of our conversation today, I looked back I looked back on your incredible talk that you did for End Well.
Mhm.
And in your End Well talk, and I would encourage everyone to go watch this incredible conversation. Well, it's like a TED like talk, so it's not really it's more, it's a one way. But
Yeah.
in your talk, as a journalist, I loved when you started talking about who, what, when, where, why. And then what you add to this question is how. And so as a journalist, we're always taught when we're writing who, what, when, where, why. Right? It's the 5 W's, right? You add how. I'm not going to say any more, but it does have to do with end of life, facing death, grief, what's on the horizon. And I just don't want to have this conversation conclude in, about 15 minutes without giving you the opportunity to talk about this incredible part of your work.
Those 6 questions, and I'm actually writing about this now, Allison, in a deeper sense. I'm about 60% done with this next book that is actually going to deal with those 6 key areas: who, what, when, where, why, and then the how. How do we help a person through a process of going through grief? Why? How is it that I've even entered into this person's life at this particular moment? Have you ever wondered, how did this happen? But you were in the right place at the right time in the right space to be with someone who needed you. And that's really the how, that question: how can I assist? How can I help? How can I enter into this space with someone in a sacred way that respects them and honors them, but also gives them an opportunity to be helped by my experiences and by my expertise? And so we always have to ask that question of how. How can I become better at what I do? How can I connect with someone who may be in need, who's going through grief? How can I help someone through an end of life experience? So if you watch the video, those 6 things, I give you a taste of that, but they're under greater development right now for my book that's going to be coming out soon. And so I would need you to watch the video, let that be the appetizer, and then we'll give you the main meal.
What I would like to suggest is one of the easiest ideas that I think is genius, that could show up to help yourself, or you can use this idea to help other people. So many of us, myself included, we all have our phones, right? We all have our phones, and we could set date reminders. Maybe it's your dentist appointment in, June, and you set a calendar reminder. Sometimes you can set a calendar reminder with multiple people, right? If it's for a meeting, let's say. There's no reason why you cannot set a calendar reminder with other people on the anniversary of a loved one's birthday, on the anniversary of someone's death.
Yes.
Because then other people will be aware. You don't have to mark that day in solitude and then start to get angry or resentful that nobody is remembering. You can take action by requesting that people have this calendar date set on their phones. They could share these moments with you, and that you're not going to be isolated on those milestone days on the calendar. What do you think of doing that, Corey?
I actually recommend it. I actually participated on April the 15th, which was actually Good Friday for those of the Christian faith. But that particular day, I went to my friend's home, and they were actually celebrating the death of one of their sisters. And so with that being said, it was just real powerful to see that we celebrate birthdays, right? But why can't we celebrate that new birthday that person has, with being birthed out of this experience in this world and into a new experience? So these are things that we can actually get together. And it wasn't oh, let's all be happy, but it was one where they were sharing with one another the memory of their loved one. And that to me is key. And it's exactly what you said. We need to put those dates on the calendar and not be afraid to embrace them, because that will be a trigger and a reminder of the great memories that that person left you. And to gather with other people to do so is absolutely phenomenal.
There is one idea that I write about in my book, Past and Present, Keeping Memories of Loved Ones Alive. And it's completely germane to what we're talking about now, which is, why not hold what I call a memory bash, a memory party? And it was a perfect idea to save the date during COVID, where we couldn't be together for funerals and wakes and shivas, that we can plan a memory bash or a memory bash celebration or event after the COVID time of isolation has concluded. But really, it's for any time. And there is a step-by-step guide that I have that I'd be more than willing to share with anyone who is watching. Just email me at Allison at AllisonGilbert.com. It may take me a couple of days to get it back to you because it's not automated. I'll just do it myself. And I will send you the how to host a memory bash guide. I'm more than happy to do that, but it's exactly what we're talking about, Pastor Corey, isn't it?
It's exactly that. And what was remarkable, and I don't know if you mentioned this, maybe I'm going to sign up. Christina, sign me up for that too as well. But I'm saying that I need, what I saw was that they had her favorite foods there. They had a playlist with all of her favorite songs.
Yes,
And
I
all
love
those,
it.
so all of those things were a part of the celebration and the experience. And it was absolutely awesome to know that, oh, they really liked this, or they really liked this cake, or they really liked this drink. And so it was just really awesome to experience that. And it allowed me to know that person who I didn't know. It allowed me to get to know them and to participate in their memory. So it's absolutely awesome.
I love that. Anyway, so email me for the memory bash guide. And there's one more idea I wanted to pass on, which I think is just, I'm just remembering all these ideas that I had in my book, Past and Present. But here's just one more, because it seems to combine memory bash with being in nature that we were talking about before. But after my father passed away, my stepmother received the greatest present of all presents that there ever were. And this also goes to how we can be supportive, how we can help other people in their loss. Listen to this. Here is the gift. She got a wicker basket. And inside the wicker basket were 63 daffodil bulbs. Why were there 63? My father died when he was 63. So each daffodil bulb, when planted, would come back every single year, and there would be 63 reminders of every year to celebrate those years of my father's life. Now, you would say, well, that's a hardship. What an awful present to make somebody else plant 63 daffodil bulbs, right? It'll be even worse, better, if you had 85 to plant, right? Or 100 to plant. We would all
Right.
want 150 to plant, right?
Right.
But of course, the goal of this gift was that my stepmother could create an event, create a day where every member of the family, every neighbor, every college friend, every high school friend, every person from work that my father knew could come together and celebrate his life. And we could all together eat and drink and have a great time. And at the same time, plant the daffodil bulbs together. And then every year when my stepmother wakes up in the spring, she goes outside and there are 63 daffodil bulbs that can remind her of her husband, my father.
Those are the things that we've been talking about. having those reminders, or what I call those mile markers. There's always, and from a spiritual standpoint, in Scripture, there were always things that the people did to remind them of certain things, significant things that had happened in their lives, and they would build up or put stones together as the place where this great thing occurred, as a reminder for generations to come that this is what happened in this space. This was the great spiritual moment that we experienced. And there's a marker or a monument that's built towards that. It's the same thing with those 63 bulbs. Those are just the markers and reminders of reflecting on those great 63 years that he was upon this earth. And it is just absolutely an awesome way. As a matter of fact, at the celebration that I went to, they passed out packets of seeds for her favorite flowers and gave them to all the family members. So all of this is just lining up the way that it's supposed to line up.
We haven't talked at all really about preparations for a loved one's death. And I'm sensitive to the fact that there could be some people listening right now or in the future who are anticipating a loss, whose loved one is very sick, and there's an acknowledgement that their loved one is not going to get better. And so they are in that space of it's coming. And I want to talk about planning. And I know you have spoken about planning and how that can be very transformative, for lack of a better word. It could be very healing. And I would love it if you would paint a picture about why planning and why structure, if you will, is so instrumental in getting through and managing such a difficult time.
I served as a chaplain. I led a spiritual care department for years, about 15 years, here in the city of Detroit, before I moved into administration where I am now. And, let me say this. There were countless situations where family members would struggle, fight, argue over the loved one who was in the bed dying about what they wanted, what should happen, what the doctors should do. And so these differences of opinions literally caused some fist fights among family members in the hospital. It's that deep. And so I would ask everyone to get involved in what I would say, put together an advanced care plan. With Grief Dialogues, we were able to do with Elizabeth Copeland some great things and she's still doing those great things with the plays that she's doing. That's really talking about this subject matter, because it does matter to have that plan in place, even right now, while you're healthy, or while you can do these things. Put together what you desire, what you want, who you want around you, what things you want to have happen, so that can be a gift to your family members. That can be a gift to your friends, your loved ones, those who care about you, because you're now speaking when you may be unable to speak, and you're letting them know the things that you want to have happen. And it's not left up to assumption or guesswork or what somebody else would want for you. When you make that clear, it makes everything else just a little bit better when it comes down to dealing and coping with anticipatory grief, which is what you were talking about, Allison. Having that anticipatory grief of when someone is preparing to pass away. And when you don't know what to do as a family member or a friend, it gets frustrating because you have to guess now, what would that person want? Or I'm going to do this because it makes me feel better. When all in all, that's not what that other person desired, who may be dying at that moment. So having an advanced care plan is absolutely necessary. And full exposure, I talked about advanced care planning for years before I did one, because I had trouble coping with my own vulnerability, my own mortality. And so let me say this, when you do it, you feel a lot better. And so I would ask that everyone would just take up arms and go ahead and do it and make it happen. Take action.
While you were speaking, my head was down for a bit, and so it must have looked like I wasn't paying attention. But what I was really doing was trying to remind myself of a website that you were making me think of. And it's called the Love Always Project. I didn't want to get it wrong, which is why I was looking down at my phone, researching it really fast before we
Right.
got out of time. The Love Always Project is another resource when it comes to this planning movement that you are talking about, that we all know is so helpful. And once you can gain control, there is power, and there is some feeling of lightness in the sea of darkness. Lightness when it comes to planning. Instead of feeling powerless, you get to have some measure of control, and that can bring a measure of lightness. Of course, it's not going to solve what's happening, right? It's not going to
Right.
bring your loved one back, or it's not going to perhaps, push off indefinitely what's coming, but it can definitely make you feel less out of control, which I think is a really powerful thing. In the last 3 minutes, I
Yes.
want to thank Reimagine again. You all know about Reimagine, but Let's Reimagine is on Instagram, Twitter under Let's_Reimagine, Reimagine Facebook, it's on Reimagine End of Life. Pastor Corey, just because we are done in 2 minutes, people don't lose you completely in 2 minutes. You're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and yes, I've mentioned TikTok, and of course you have a website. And Damani for Grief, I want to thank you again for being the support behind this program. I want to remind everyone, Damani for Grief has a private Facebook group conversation platform where if you don't want to end this access, we've talked about the importance of reaching out, talking, being heard, sharing, listening, communicating, being a part of a human larger picture than just being isolated. Please join, take advantage of that platform. It's there for you, of course, and it's free. So I do want to make sure that I emphasized that point. Andy, Christina, thank you for your help. And in the last 30 seconds, Pastor Corey, the last word.
The last word is this: believe that you can get through anything that you face utilizing the resources that are available to you, but you must move towards them. And as you move towards them, you will find yourself in a better position to cope with, deal with, and handle your grief in a greater way. So I thank you for being a part of this.
I thank you too. And get the right adhesive bandage for you.
There you go.
All right, guys, thank you very much. I will see you next month. For Jean Chatsky and Catherine Tuggle, I can't wait to take on that conversation. Until the next time, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, everyone.